Hello and welcome back to Mind Matters. It's so good to see you guys again. Well, I can't see you, but you can see me. But to those that are watching, welcome back. Episode 6. I can't believe we've got to episode 6. I didn't think there would be so many topics to discuss, but it's much like a Pringles can. Once you pop it, you just can't stop, and there's so many things we can discuss. So today's episode is got to do with all about ableism, which is a form of discrimination, and as you have probably noticed in the news, there's a global push towards the eradication of discrimination across the board. Stuff like Black Lives Matter and Men Are Trash, which has got to do with police brutality, institutionalized racism, and gender-based violence. Very big things that are being discussed at the moment, but one of the other ones is ableism. Now, the definition by Merriam-Webster states that ableism is the discrimination or prejudice towards people with disabilities. In the next second or so, something's going to pop up that you can pause, take a screenshot, or write it down so you get the gist of what ableism is, and we'll be right back. And we are back. As you can see from the previous slide, there's the definition that I described earlier is in the video, so you can use it to educate yourself. Moving on, before I start in discussing today's topic, I need to add a disclaimer to this, and I think this is important because it will be the theme. Although we're talking about ableism, there's an underlying theme as well, and that is it is important to note that there are certain things regarding ableism that I don't agree with. As a disabled man, C45 quadriplegic for 12 years, having to use a wheelchair, being basically paralyzed from my nipple line down, even I don't agree with certain things that ableism is trying to correct, in inverted commas. And that is, I think, the most important thing you guys can take away from this video, is that you need to start treating us as individuals, treating the disabled as individuals and not a collective, because disabilities are different, just as people are different. And it's important to ask how a disabled person wants to be treated, because if you had to do certain things on this list, and I'll discuss them as we go through them, I wouldn't necessarily say I'll be offended. There isn't a lot of things that do offend me, but it would be irritating, and we'll get into that. So the next slide is going to list 6 common scenarios that take place within ableism, and which the movement is trying to eradicate. As I said, I don't agree with all of them, but we'll get into that as we go one by one. So check out the slide, and we'll be right back. Alright guys, so you looked at the slide now that showed 6 common forms of ableism, or let's reiterate, ableism is discrimination against people with disabilities. So these are the 6 common forms that people who are fighting ableism are trying to eradicate. Again, I don't agree with all of them. In fact, there's two of the 6 that I don't agree with, but we'll get into that when we get to them. So let's do the first one. And that is ensuring that accessibility does not only cater for wheelchair ramps. Obviously that goes without saying, because there are more types of disabilities than just people who have to use wheelchairs. I'm not a disability expert, but off the top of my head I can think of 2, and that is using closed caption for videos for deaf people and using braille on signage for blind people. There's obviously a lot more, and I'll leave that up to the experts to discover and let us know what we need to do with that. The second one is the use of ableist language. Now, this is one that I don't completely agree with, and this is my personal opinion. And again, remember the underlying theme of asking the disabled of how they want to be treated. So for myself, my identity stems from the fact that I'm a C45 quadriplegic. I have a spinal cord injury. I am paralyzed from my nipple line down. So whatever else you decide to call me is irrelevant. If you call me handicapped, disabled, differently abled, crippled, it is literally irrelevant to me. because I know my own identity, but that might not be the same for everybody else. Number 3 is when able-bodied people fail to check their privilege. Now, able-bodied people can't be held responsible for being able-bodied, just as disabled people can't be held responsible for being disabled. So we're not asking for you to apologize for your ableness. We're asking you to understand that whatever you do is 10 times harder for us to do. Imagine this. You get to a building, a high-rise, let's say 30 stories, but the lift is broken. You can still use the stairs to get to the top floor. What happens to somebody like me, who's in a wheelchair, that's too heavy to carry up 30 flights of steps? So what happens to me? I usually have to be turned away, or I have to reschedule, or whatever it may be. So just remember, the able-bodied peeps, that we are asking you not to apologize for your ableness. That is a blessing. But rather to understand the difficulties we go through. And the only way you're going to understand that is by speaking to us. This entire thing boils down to communication. Honestly, it really does. Number 4 is assuming that people with disabilities have no autonomy. We are not a group of weirdos or a group of strange people. We are human beings that have wants and needs, desires, passions, fears, anxieties about certain things. So when we go to a restaurant, give us our own menu. Ask us what we would like to eat. Don't just assume that the person sitting next door or alongside us is there to speak for us. Some disabilities do require it, but for instance, my disability doesn't. I can order perfectly fine by myself. So just remember that we have our own identities. We're not just the disabled, quote unquote. Number 5 is when able-bodied people demand to know how our disabilities occurred. Now this is one I'm a little bit iffy on. Okay, so obviously, first off, able-bodied people should never demand to know, because some of our disabilities are because of trauma. Whether it's a gunshot wound or break your neck on the rugby field, as is in my case, a diving accident, whatever it may be. So ask us politely, but this is also a call to the disabled people. When somebody does ask you correctly, you know, they use manners, they speak to you as a person, they don't degrade you, etc. And you turn around and say, no. What you're doing is you're losing a teaching moment. You're losing the ability to teach that able-bodied person about your disability. Disabled people scream from the top of their lungs that they want to be seen as equal. This is one of the things we have to do to get that equality, is that we have to teach people about our disabilities. And it's not up to them. It's not their responsibility. We are the minority. We need to stand up for ourselves and speak about our disabilities, no matter how painful it might be. And if you're not ready, then don't speak about it. But if you are, speak about it from all 4 corners of the globe, because people need to learn. And the only way they can learn is by learning from us. We are the people living that lived experience. And lastly, the assumption that all disabilities are visible. Alright guys, this is not the case. There's many disabilities that you cannot see. And there are many disabilities you can see. Do not take away the person's identity by assuming because you can't see their disability, it's not real. Now yes, you do get the odd person who does maybe exaggerate the extent of their disabilities, but those are very far and few between. Most of us are very real about our disabilities because they impact our lives. I'll do another video at some stage about what I go through on a daily basis with regards to my disability. It's not just the fact that I can't walk. So remember, disabilities are not all visible. Alright guys, that rounds up everything. And basically, as you saw, all of these things boil down to communication. All of these forms of ableism boil down to communication. respect, integrity, dignity. The list goes on and on and on. So this is a plea to ask the able-bodied communities out there to help us fight this battle, because just like most social movements, we are in the minority. We need help. We need able-bodied people to stand up for us, literally and figuratively. So please, do what you can to help the disabled to get an equal footing, to be seen as valued and important members of society. That brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. As per usual, I enjoyed chatting to you guys. If you were touched by this video in any way, please share it far and wide. Comment below, like it, show your friends. It really means a lot to me that I can get these messages out, and I have a platform to do so. And yeah, just look after yourselves, guys, and we'll see you soon for the next episode of Mind Matters. Keep well.